I have spent 20 plus years in LGBTQI+ activism, and 5 years ago I set up a global human rights organisation right here in the northeast of England, which documents the human rights abuses against LGBT people worldwide. And we started with 7 volunteers in an office with no windows whatsoever, and we've since grown over that 5 years to now have 80 plus volunteers in 40 plus different countries around the world, documenting what's happening on the ground, bringing real change to queer communities everywhere. And during this time, I've had to keep the lights on through hard work, through death threats, through hate mail, and as you can imagine, working on a full-time job as well to do that. And the harms that we've documented really speak to what you'll hear of the stories today. These are the push factors which lead a lot of queer people globally to move from one part of the world to another. But we couldn't have done this without a little bit of hope. Hope is key. It's something that keeps me going. It's something I know keeps our volunteers going. And one day we hope that the world will be better for queer people too. But first I'm going to ask you 3 very important questions. So first of all, my first question being is, what are these forces? What pushes people out of their nation states to seek safety elsewhere? My second question is, how can we humanize these often very silent stories, the queer people who are seeking asylum who you hear nothing about? And also, what can you do by the end of this talk, hopefully? So before we get there, and keep this hope in our minds and elevate these voices, I'm going to tell you 3 stories of people who've been part of my journey throughout this last 20 years of my existence doing LGBT rights. And so I'm going to take you to the shores of Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, there are no queer bars. There's no queer meeting spaces whatsoever. If you are queer and you want to meet partners, you meet in the sand dunes, as you say here, for sex. People don't go online because they're scared. People certainly don't reveal themselves in public, and any people who have been high-profile activists in the past have been raped and murdered by local communities. So as you can imagine, people keep very well hidden. And so when I came across Mohammed, I was working on his case with him for asylum in Newcastle. When I came to Mohammed and started speaking, he told me his story. He said how he met his British partner on these very sand dunes who was working out there. His partner had offered him a ticket to come to the UK to visit him, which sounded great. Mohammed was overwhelmed, overjoyed. They'd fallen in love together. But at this time, his family had found out all about him. So his family locked him in the home for 3 days, and they beat and they tortured him over the course of that 3-day period. One day, Mohammed's brother had left the door open by accident. And so as a result, he grabbed what little things he could, including that ticket, and he fled to the UK and landed in London Heathrow Airport, where he rang his partner and said, "I'm safe. I can't wait to see you." His partner then said, "Under no uncertain terms can you contact me again. I never actually told you I had a wife and 2 children." So at this point, he was abandoned, alone, in Heathrow Airport. He couldn't go home, so he sought asylum instead. And he was stuck in the system for 4 years. Then we have Dee. I met Dee at an event I was running in Newcastle, and she said, "I want to tell my story." She was from Zimbabwe. She was a very fierce, very wonderful bisexual activist. She was helping people in Zimbabwe. This is a land, remember, where Robert Mugabe had called queer people pigs and dogs and said that we were influenced by the West. And Dee started to get outspoken, and as a result of that, government vans started to appear in her neighborhood with blacked-out windows. State agents were going around a neighborhood asking, who is this Dee? Where does she belong? And in the process of asking the neighbors, her family found out. And due to the shame and the fear of this, Dee was ordered by her family to undergo a so-called corrective rape procedure, whereby her uncle would rape her for 7 nights in a row and place herbs in her vagina, which led her to be sore, itchy, ashamed, and traumatized. Dee fled to the UK, you'll be pleased to know, but brought that trauma with her, obviously. And when she got here, she told a sellout group, a bit like tonight, her own story, and then humiliatingly said, "And the Home Office said to me, why don't you just go back to Zimbabwe? Because you're bisexual, you can marry a man." My third story is that of Shada. Shada is, I'm writing a book, and I interviewed Shada as part of this. She was Iran's only and first ever drag queen. Inspired by RuPaul, Shada set up an Instagram account disguising her identity under heavy makeup and started to grow in popularity in Iran. She went to underground queer gatherings in Tehran, numbering up to 200 people. Grew in confidence, and one of her followers, who doubted that she was really in Iran, to prove them wrong, took this photograph that you see here outside of the bridge. Moments later, however, the Iranian morality police arrested her. She was taken to the police station, she was stripped naked, she was spat at, she was sexually abused, and then she had to wait there for hours, naked, vulnerable, and alone. Even worse, they'd went to her Instagram profile and pulled out illustrations that she'd drawn of an imam. And this image of an imam, they claimed, was blasphemy, which is a crime of execution in Iran. So she then was given an opportunity for bail, which she still finds odd to this day. So she fled. She used that opportunity to flee Iran and come to the UK. But her character was broken. She described to me how she would never, ever do drag again. So why am I telling these three stories? Because I want you to know that these people face real intersectional problems when they're coming to the UK. They're facing all manner of fleeing queerphobia, fleeing family and community violence, notwithstanding the trauma that people go through as they do it. So upon reaching something like the border control of the UK in an airport, like Mohammed did, you must seek asylum instantly. If not, it proves to you that you could look suspicious to the Home Office. So you've got to get there, tell your story instantly. Despite your journey being traumatic, despite your story being traumatic, you may have muddled memories of the event, and that therefore affects you. But that story is documented and it's cast in stone, and it will follow your case right through to the court case at the end. Now, you may be asked questions like, and these are real Home Office questions, can you please tell me Elton John's music songs? Can you tell me who Oscar Wilde is? So these are the types of questions you get asked, alongside probing sexual questions. And you may come from a conservative culture where talking about sex is taboo. It's not the done thing, never mind sexuality or gender identity. You have to prove it. How do you prove that? Because the next question is always inevitably, prove to us that you are LGBTQI+. You can't do that. Most people don't keep photographs and videos and personal messages on their phones. They delete them, they hide them. Because they could be weaponized by your family, your friends, your police, the state. So that takes us through the next stage. If you get through this stage, you could be put in a detention center where you are at risk of Legionnaire's disease, or you are placed with the people from your own home country who may be just as queerphobic as the people you are leaving behind. If you're a trans woman or trans man, you may be placed in the wrong detention center. And during this time, you are expected, during your course of stay here, to collect evidence of your queerness. So go to pride marches, go to queer support groups, go to gay bars, even though you don't drink alcohol because you're from Iran. You've got to do all of these things to prove your queerness. And you are given £50 a week from the government to do that. And that's to pay for your bills. If you're pregnant, you get an extra £3. So if not a detention center, you may be placed in housing. The government will give you housing. In the case of G4S, who had these red doors in the northeast of England, which were marked the homes where people seeking asylum were placed. And local people found out about this. So they pelted eggs at the buildings. They put dog mess through their letterbox. And the signs of the National Front were spray painted on their doors. As a person seeking asylum, never mind a queer person who's bringing their intense trauma with them, you are stuck in that home with nothing to do, watching your skills being squandered for at least a year, or until you gain refugee status if you are lucky, and if your original account doesn't go against you. You will stand about a 62% chance of success. Then you've got the hostile rhetoric, which we all know. This hostile rhetoric will reduce you down to a person in a boat. It will reduce you down to an economic migrant, despite your whole intersectional background, the stories you're bringing as a queer person, the life you've lived. The media will tell the British public that you are here to steal jobs, flood the UK, and that's your purpose for doing it. And that hostile rhetoric will lead to quite hideous events, as we've seen over the summer, where some people found it interesting to set fire to a hotel to murder people like you as a queer person seeking asylum, who were in that hotel. You are offered some support. The government will give you housing, as I've said. You may be placed in a detention centre. You will be given £50 a week to pay for everything, absolutely everything. That includes your phone credit to keep in contact with people back home. So there is some support, maybe some basic English classes at a local college, and that's it. And I once emailed an organisation who deals with refugees, not a queer-specific one, and said, what support do you offer for queer people? And they went, oh, we haven't had any. And I went, wow, fascinating. I said, because I actually know a queer person seeking asylum that goes to your service. And this is the dual burden when you come here to the UK yourself, because you still can't open up amongst your fellow homes people around you because you fear the queerphobia that could come from it. So you don't get the support needs you're after, you don't get the support needs you want. You will fear people dressed in uniform. You will fear services like that. But I did say originally this story is about hope, and hope is the thing that keeps us going. So I'm going to tell you some really hopeful things that can happen when we put the right support in place, when we take away some of this rhetoric and strip back some of this harm. So first of all, let me tell you about what can be achieved. Mohammed from Sierra Leone, actually, we worked hard at his case. He got refugee status, which meant he was allowed to study. He's now at university, and he's actually training to be a doctor so he can help torture victims like he was tortured. It's brilliant. Dee from Zimbabwe, who was correctively raped, or so-called correctively raped, became a nurse after winning her case. We worked hard on this one too. She wants to heal herself and others. And I'm really pleased to say that Shada is working and is doing drag again. Little bit of hope helps us all, doesn't it? But you know, my big question is over to you. So what can you do, as I said at the beginning of this talk? There are things you can do to help, however small. First one is know who these organizations are. There are local ones nearby, there are national ones. Research the work that they do. People have different types and levels of support that they need. They're coming with different stories, not just one story. And also, if you can, volunteer with them. Donate. You don't have to speak multiple languages. That can all be part of what you do, the training you do. But if you can't do that, that's absolutely fine. The big one you do have to do, and my ask of you today, is please let's challenge some of these misconceptions. We've really got to be working at this. Let's now make this hostile climate a little bit less hostile. Let's make this town and region somewhere that's safe for queer people seeking asylum and all people seeking asylum. Thank you very much, everybody.